Hi, I'm Jo from J.H.Leather, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to combine rope with leather. Now this gives you more of a variety of options that you can offer your customers in the form of rope and leather dog leads, as well as neck straps for cameras and binoculars and that sort of thing. And my particular favourite, the wrist strap that I use for my binoculars when I am out photographing. Now these files are going to be available as a PDF pattern pack download, as well as an acrylic template set, and they're also going to be available as a laser ready file for those of you with laser cutters who want to use the patterns on that. So let's get started. So to start with, we are going to be working on the camera strap, and for that I'm just going to be using the anchor strap template. Now we're going to need some rope, which is 8mm thick, and we are going to need our anchor attachments. Now there will be links to where you can get all of these included in the information pack that you get with the PDF patterns. What we can then do is transfer our pattern onto our chosen piece of leather, and as I am making the neck strap I am going to be having 2 of these anchor points on it, so I want to draw around that twice and then we can cut that out. Now if you are going to be making a wrist strap, you want 1 anchor point along with 1 ring attachment and then the ring stopper. And when it comes to cutting around the point on this, you can either do it like I am in this part of the video, where I am using the knife to go around the whole of the turn. Or what you can do if you're still new to cutting around sort of shapes like this, you can do the nibble technique, which is what you would have seen in a lot of my videos, where we're going to be cutting straight lines and taking a little bit off at a time, working our way around that curve. And once you've got both of those cut out, what we are going to do is some edging. So we are going to edge around the whole of that nice grain side. Now the edge tool that I'm using is my number 1 edge tool, which is roughly 1mm. We can then apply some stain to the edges and polish that in. And I also like to apply some burnishing gum at this point as well and polish that in also. Then if you like, you can choose to add a crease line to your pieces. And then you should end up with something that looks a little bit like this. And what we're going to do is transfer those stitching marks. And then with your dividers set to the stitching width on the patterns, which is roughly 3mm in from the edge, we can join those points up. For the lines in the centre, you can join those points with a ruler and your scratch awl, and then we can do our stitch markings. Now when we are stitching, what I am using here in this video is actually a rounded pricking iron. So I'm going to have round holes in this because I'm going to be stitch marking both sides of this little shape, and we are going to be stitch marking it all the way through. And this way I know all the holes are going to line up much more easily than if I was using a diamond chisel or a pricking iron, where I would have to use an inverse one to get the stitches to line up on the other side. So you should have your little shape looking something like this. And what we are going to do now is just reduce the thickness on the ends of those turns down to about half thickness. We can then cut our rope and seal the ends. Now for this, I am making myself a short neck strap. So I've cut this rope 66 centimeters long, and there is a bit more information on sizing in the information pack with the patterns and the templates. And then what we're going to do is start by fitting one of our shapes through our anchor points. And then if you have it, this is where some stitching pins are going to come in handy. Now, if you don't have any, you can use needles for this. But what we want to do is make sure that we have everything secure. So we're going to use the stitching pins in the very tip of that point to start with. We're going to go through the center of that rope and then out through and back into the shape on the other side. Now we want to make sure that this is as central as possible and that the rope is butted up to the back of our fitting. Once we've got that first pin in, we can then put another one into the middle line of stitching, anchoring that rope in the center of this strap. And what I like to do at this point is put another of the stitching pins, one on either side, just to keep that rope in the middle of our shape. So it should look a little bit like this. And what we're going to do is do our stitching. So to start with, I stitch around the edge of my shape first, and I'm going to start with at least 2 back stitches. Now, as these are circle holes, what we can do if we are struggling to get our needles through is either use our scratchel or a slightly larger needle just to get the holes a little bit wider to allow our needle and thread to come through. And we will be using the double hand or saddle stitch method for this. And although the holes are round, the stitching method remains the same. You can also use some pliers to help pull your needles out when you are stitching. And when we get to the end of this line of stitching, we are going to be stitching through the rope as well. You want to make sure you pull your stitches nice and tight. Now, depending on what thread you're using, it can be a bit slick and you might need to just keep pulling in your thread nice and tight, like what I'm having to do here in the video. And then once you get to the end of your line of stitching, you're going to do at least 2.5 back stitches to get those edges nice and flush and secure. So with the outside of our shape stitched, what we can do is just trim the ends of our thread down. Now, if you're using a polyester thread like what I am, you can use a lighter and just mount the ends of those threads, or a thread zapper. And if you're using linen, then you can use a little bit of glue on the ends of those threads to secure them. And then once we've done that, we can now stitch the center row of our stitching, and that is going to be stitching through the rope, and this is where the strength in our shape is going to be. And once you've finished stitching the first side, if you haven't already, you can cut your rope to length and then fit the shape and the anchor point on to the other end. And once the shape is held in place with your pins or your needles, you can then stitch that on the same as we did with the first side. So you should now have something that looks like this, and what we can do is some finishing touches. So for me, I'm just going to apply some burnishing gum here and then use my bone folder along the edges to get them nice and flush, and also finish that off with my staining cloth. And now you should have your little strap looking a little bit like this. Now I made mine for my binoculars, so I'm using quite a short strap on that, and this is what it looks like. If you are enjoying this video and would like to learn how to create more leathercraft projects, then I have a whole range of printable PDF pattern packs and durable acrylic templates available for you to purchase via my website jhleather.co.uk, or you can head to the links in the description. Now moving on to one of the dog leads. Now I'm going to be making a slip lead, so I want the ring attachment point along with the stopper. So what we're going to do is grab our materials, and for this on the handle, what we're going to do is cut the handle to the width that we need first. So that's going to be the overall width at the widest point on the shapes, and then on one end we are going to draw around that point and mark on our stitching guides. We are then going to mark the overall length for our handle, including the attachments, and that is 51 centimeters. I can then square that end and cut that strap to size before marking the end of the shape onto that end of my handle along with the stitch marks. We can now use our dividers and join these two ends together. And what we can do now is cut our handle out. Now, information on the leather used and the thicknesses needed for this project are included in the information pack that you get with the patterns, as well as the laserable files and the acrylic templates. And once you've got your handle cut out, what you can do is go ahead and do some edging all the way along that nice grain side. Now on the flesh side, what we're going to do is transfer our stitch mark onto the flesh side, and then we're going to edge the handle between those points. Now if you're choosing to pad your handle, you don't need to edge on the flesh side at all. And once you've done the edges, you can go ahead and stain and polish them along with adding a crease line. You can then use your dividers to mark on your stitching line around the attachment points, and then use a ruler to join the ones that are going to be in the center through the rope. You should have something looking a little bit like this. And what I'm going to do is split the ends of these little attachments down to 3 millimeters, as this is going to help the leather mold around our rope a bit more easily. What we can then do is our stitch marking. So once again, I'm using my 4 millimeter rounded pricking irons, and we're going to stitch mark both ends all the way through. So you should have your ends looking a little bit like this. And what we're going to do is just skive the very end of that down to half thickness. Now, because this material is quite light on the flesh side where it's been split, what I'm going to do is apply some stain to that end, just because if we do see any of it, it's going to be easier to cover that now. So I've actually gone ahead and already made and fitted the ring to this piece of rope, because it is fitted exactly the same as we have the other pieces in this project. Now, because it's a slip lead, what we want to do is make sure we put the end of our rope through that ring before attaching our handle. Now we're going to attach the handle in the same method as we did earlier, using our stitching pins or some needles to hold the handle onto that rope, making sure we get it fitted into the center. Now I did struggle on this to get the little stitching pins that I have to actually hold closed right on the very end of this piece. However, the pin itself isn't going to fall out, and it's still holding the rope where I need it. I just need to be a little bit careful as to where my hands are so I don't end up poking myself with that. So once you've got that held in place, what you can do is go ahead and stitch it as we did earlier in this video. As we are making a slip lead, what we want is to actually attach a little ring stopper. Now, if you are going to be making a hand strap like what I have here, we want that stopper to go on the inside of the loop so that it doesn't get too tight on your wrist. For a slip lead, however, this needs to go on the other side because it's to stop the lead from opening too far. And you can fit that once more with your pins and then stitch that onto the rope, making sure you don't stitch through the rope so that it can run up and down the length as it needs to be adjusted. We can then do our finishing touches. So once again, I'm going to be applying some burnishing gum and then using my bone folder to rub those edges nice and flush before going over it once more with my staining cloth. And you should have your lead looking a little bit like this. So that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching and you learned something new. Now, if you did enjoy the video, please do give it a thumbs up to let YouTube know and to help get this video out to more crafters. And I shall see you in the next one.